Welcome back, everybody. For those of you that joined us on the pre-trade deadline show, you might recognize some of the faces here on this video. This is the one we sort of talked about, we thought we might do, and then a lot of stuff happened today. It's Monday. Trade deadline has come and gone for 2022, so we brought most of the folks that helped us out with our pre-deadline show back here. We've got Matt, we've got Brooke, we've got Steven, Mariah, Blaine, Matthew, Victor's down in the corner, and myself, Jim Parsons. You guys can plug yourselves at some point throughout this next hour or so. But yeah, we're going to talk some of the biggest trades that happened today. So not just today, I suppose. I think it was Victor brought it up that we should probably talk some of the bigger trades, because in fact, some of the bigger trades didn't happen today. The biggest names that moved at the deadline actually happened before Monday. So we're going to cover some of the winners and losers on this 2022 trade deadline, and then we'll talk some of the specifics if you guys are cool with that. So let's go to maybe what I think is the biggest deal of the day. Marc-Andre Fleury. Here's a guy that we didn't think might move. A lot of talk that he wasn't willing to leave Chicago, but there was some last minute rumblings that maybe the Minnesota Wild might get in here. So that does happen. Minnesota Wild pick up Marc-Andre Fleury. He's going, so some salaries retained in this deal. I think 50% of the deal. Chicago's 2022 second round pick is conditional and would become a first round pick if Minnesota makes it to the conference final. So Brooke, I'll start with you. What's your immediate you know what? Sorry, let's go to Mariah, because Mariah covers the Minnesota Wild, and she's probably itching to talk about this one. So let's start with Mariah. Mariah, what's your first take of the fact? One, were you surprised that Minnesota crept in here sort of last minute? And two, what are you thinking now that you have Talbot and Fleury as your 1A, 1B, I guess?
Well, they made me look like a fool. I'll say that. I know last time I was on the show, I was like, oh, they're not going to do anything. And then they pull this out. I had three emotions at first. I was like, okay, what the heck are we doing? And then I kind of accepted it. Now I'm excited about it. So I was kind of just like, why at first? I mean, obviously I knew why. I shouldn't say why, but I was a little upset that we let Kahkonen go, because I thought he was kind of going to be our future goaltender going forward. But I'm super excited to have Fleury, and the fact that they're trying to go for it all and all or nothing, I guess. So I'm excited to see it, and I have always loved Fleury, so I'm happy he's coming here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the deal, right? With Minnesota, this is the year. If you're going to go for it, it's got to be this year, right? Because you got the Ryan Suter, you got the Zach Parise buyouts that are going to be hitting this club really, really hard next year. And the years out, what have they got? Like something like $15 million at dead cap space or something that they're going to have to dance around. So this is kind of the year. I guess if there's a silver lining on the Kahkonen thing, it's that you get Jacob Middleton coming from San Jose, and he's a pretty decent defenseman, at least was this year. Brooke, what's your thoughts here? Do you agree? Were you surprised? Are you a little more excited about the prospect of Fleury in Minnesota? I mean, you cover Chicago, so you know all about him.
I actually was a little surprised, only because the longer it dragged out, the more I didn't think it was going to happen, because it just seemed kind of on and off, the rumors were. But after it happened, it's bittersweet. I loved Fleury, like Mariah said. He's fantastic. I don't think you can ask for anything more from a goalie, but at the same time, he deserved so much better than what the Blackhawks can do for him. And their last game, which was last night, it was like 5-2 against Minnesota in the second period, or against Winnipeg in the second period. And I was like, oh gosh, Fleury, get out while you can, please. We don't want this to happen to you anymore. So it's bittersweet, and I want to see him win a cup. He deserves to win another cup with where he's at, and it just works out for both sides. He can't take the Blackhawks anywhere. As fabulous as he is, they're just not there to win yet. So it is bittersweet, but I'll be rooting for him for sure, even though it's in the Central Division, but I will be rooting for him.
It's hard to blame Minnesota for doing this. We don't know exactly what Fleury's going to show up, but we do know that when he's hot, he's among the best goaltenders in the league. Victor, I'm going to run over to you for a second here, because you're San Jose, and so you know a little bit about what's going on with Middleton and Kaapo Kahkonen. You get him in San Jose now. So what's your take on the domino effect that fell when Fleury went to Minnesota?
Yeah, it was a bit surprising. I think that some people were thinking if Minnesota did deal a goalie, it would be the older and recently ineffective Talbot, even though he was an all-star and looked great at the beginning of the season. Seems like he's tailed off quite a bit, but it was a bit surprising. I also thought that if the Sharks were gonna, I thought that they might trade Reimer. Seems like that didn't happen at the last minute, but they definitely need to address goaltending. I think that's no secret. They tried in the offseason to acquire Adin Hill, which hasn't worked out so well. I like the cost that they used here. I mean, Middleton has been a really solid player. I think he's going to be a great player, a depth player. He was playing a little too far up in the lineup, I think, in San Jose, but he's going to be great. A little bit, second or third pairing guy, probably really physical. I think he adds that element, which will be nice for Minnesota. As far as Kahkonen, I mean, I think we've seen him play really well at times, but I also think that he's been pretty inconsistent. Looking at his expected goals numbers, they haven't been good. So at least he's younger and he has some potential. So that's nice, but I still think that they still have question marks in goal between him and Hill. I guess they'll let them fight it out. And Reimer, I guess he's going to hang around. They have another year with him. So I'm very surprised they didn't move him, actually. That would have made a lot of sense for a team that's actually contending.
Considering all the goaltending talk, Victor, do you think the Reimer non-move was just contract related, too much money, or what?
I think it comes down to the Sharks still believe they can make the playoffs, which I don't understand, but they are steadfast in that belief. So they want to keep pushing and keep trying to do that. And I think they also think that even if they internally believe that it's over for this year, him having another year and how well he's played this year, I think that they think he could be good next year and that they could retool and be competitive next year, which I still think is a long shot, but that's, I think, where their mind is, that they'd rather hold on to Reimer for a run next season as opposed to trading him this season.
If it makes you feel any better, Mariah, that I think it was Logan Couture said a lot of nice things about Jacob Middleton today and just how much this kid gets it, and he's going to be a heck of a player. So if you're worried at all that you gave up your future goaltender for an AHL signed defenseman, it might not be the sky is falling sort of situation. All right, let's move over to another trade that happened kind of under the wire here. Rakell goes from the Anaheim Ducks to the Pittsburgh Penguins. I was shocked with this one because I did not expect the Penguins to pull off a major move. I watched Brian Burke on all of the trade deadline shows today, and he had the same speech on both TSN and Sportsnet, but he said that they were he said Ron Hextall was in on every call. He was a part of every conversation, but he didn't like either one, what he had to pay to get the asset, or two, they didn't have the cap space. Well, then they went and added Rakell, who I think is like $3.8 million. There's obviously some salary retention here. Matt, I'm going to move over to you, Matt Grazel. You know a little bit about Rakell because you had mentioned that you thought the Rangers were at one point looking at him. Were you shocked by this trade? What do you think of the trade?
Well, I didn't think he was going to go to the Rangers because their demand was too high. Then apparently what General Manager Chris Joy wanted to trade for Rakell. The Penguins were rumored as a team that was as a possible destination for Rakell. So it's not, I guess, a total surprise. It's just they, no matter what happens, they always seem to be adding players to Crosby and Malkin. So, and they always are in the hunt every year for the Stanley Cup. So this isn't totally a surprise. I guess they sacrificed a little bit of their bottom six players, and I think it was Dominic Simon and Zach Aston Reese.
Yeah,
they traded away, but I suppose that they can put Rakell on the bottom six at times, or moving up to the top six, or so. Yeah, I think it's a good trade for them. Adding another veteran player who can contribute, because they have some injuries with Jason Zucker injured, and so yeah, it seems like it's a good move for them on paper.
Yeah, well, so the total trade is 2022 second round pick, Zach Aston Reese, Dominic Simone, and Cale Klang, the goalie. Did anybody capture how much salary retention is going to be retained in this deal? Do we know yet? Has it come down officially that they're doing that? Steven, you look like you got us.
35% according to Cap Friendly.
35%. So what is that? So what is it? 3.8 million, 10s,
1.3.
That's like 1.2, 1.3 something. Yeah. So
1.3.
That's a pretty good deal for Pittsburgh. I guess if you're a team that doesn't have a lot of cap space in which to work with, you move a couple players out. Blaine, I see you shaking your head here. Do you have a comment on this one in terms of Rakell going to the Penguins?
I'm just surprised that the Penguins were able to pull off yet another move to add a quality player. I guess you got Crosby. You got to make a run. You got to try.
Yeah. Let's stick with the Rangers, Matt. I'll give you one more shot here at talking about your team. Andrew Copp. Now, here is a complicated trade. Let me see if I can find the details of it. By the way, I don't know. Did the Tyler Motte trade officially go through with Vancouver?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So
think
that's
so,
a
yeah.
2023 fourth round pick.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you, Zader, talk about that one in a second. But okay, where is this? There's like a bunch of conditions wrapped into this one. So Winnipeg gets Morgan Barron, 2023 fifth round pick, future considerations. The 2 conditional second round picks. One of the second round picks can turn into a first if the Rangers win 2 rounds in the playoff and Copp plays 50% of the playoff games. And then the other second round pick can be Winnipeg's option 2022 or 2023. And then the Rangers are getting Copp and a 2023 sixth round pick. So, man, there's a lot going on here. We knew that the Winnipeg Jets wanted a first for Copp, but we probably figured that might not happen. I was a little surprised it didn't, actually, with the amount of first round picks that were going out everywhere. Matt, what do you think? Do you like the fact that the Rangers were the team here? Because there were a lot of teams rumored to be interested in Andrew Copp. You like the fact that they were the ones to get him?
Yeah, I was. A couple of months ago, I wrote about a couple of players that the Rangers should target from the Jets, and Andrew Copp was one of those players. Based on his contract, I mean, he's a free agent at the end of the year, but he represents that kind of versatile play that Gallant seems to want because of his ability to play both center or the wing positions. He could fit, I think, pretty much anywhere on any of the 4 lines, depending on any needs that arise. He can play on the power play. He racks up minutes on the penalty kill as well. So he's really the kind of player that they need to add with the injuries that they currently are waiting for players to get back, and Kevin Rooney and Kaapo. And once they get those players back, it'll be even more depth to the team. And they could also move Philip Hedl to the wing, where I think he's been a little bit more effective. I don't like him at center that much, even though it's his natural position. He just seems, the few times that he's played on the wing this year, he seems to be better offensively. But yeah, Copp looks like a good trade, especially given that things kind of, I guess, didn't materialize with Reichel, who's now on the Penguins. So this isn't a bad option.
Yeah, well, he's definitely a guy who can offer both the two-way play, right? He can play penalty kill, he can play depth, he's physical, he can add that skill offensively. Matthew Zader down the bottom there. What are you thinking in terms of, like, there was a lot of teams in on this, and let's touch also a little bit on Justin Braun here, because he goes to the Rangers in an earlier trade. The Rangers were, from what I understood, not necessarily into the rental market so much as they were looking for players with a little bit of term, because you had heard a million rumors that they were in on JT Miller. What do you make of the fact that they were able to land Andrew Copp, Justin Braun, both who are pending free agents here?
Yeah, it's especially what they were saying, like they were more into trying to do some more hockey trades rather than the rentals, right? And adding Braun, I thought, well, maybe they're going to be moving out a defenseman, but that didn't happen. So they've just bolstered their defense with Braun now. And Copp, like Matt said, he adds a lot of versatility to that lineup, and he was really good in Winnipeg. I mean, really good faceoff man, did everything for that team. And he seemed to be getting better. I don't know. I believe he has like 16 or 17 goals this season. So it's like he's starting to score a lot more as well. So I think he's a lot more productive of a player than being a regular bottom 6 guy. So I think the Rangers got really a lot stronger with those 2 moves, and then adding Tyler Motte from the Canucks as well. He's an unrestricted free agent coming up as too. So, I mean, there's another rental player added on potentially, but he will. I mean, these guys are going to help the Rangers potentially win a cup, especially if Shesterkin gets on keeps playing the way he has. I mean, this team is really strong. I don't like that the Canucks traded Motte, but they couldn't get an extension done with him. So, you get an asset, albeit a 4th round pick, which I thought he was worth a lot more than that.
The Rangers made up ground in a hurry, hey? Like all the teams in the East, Florida, Tampa, all these teams were really getting a lot better. And then all of a sudden the Rangers kind of came swooping in there last minute and picked up some key pieces. Blaine, what are you thinking about what the Rangers did? I guess mostly today.
Well, they needed a little bit of grit. They needed some help on at center, especially on the third line, and they did it. They got it. Adding Braun helps bolster that blue line, especially when Shesterkin is having a career season, a Hart Trophy season. You add a little bit of defense there and a little bit of grit, and that team could make some noise in the playoffs.
Steven, do you agree? Do you think the Rangers might be a sleeper team here? Because they're a decent team, especially with their goaltending. What do you think of the Rangers and where they fare in this Eastern Conference?
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded conference and it'll be hard for any team really. I mean, it's anyone's guess who comes out of the East as the champion. But I think as long as Shesterkin's playing this well, they've got a shot. I don't think they can really match up with some of the top teams in the East in terms of forward groups or defensive depth, but they've got Adam Fox and they've got Igor Shesterkin and, you know, a couple other superstar players. So they've got a chance.
By show of hands here, how many people think that Andrew Kopp's going to be the most overpaid free agent this summer? I'm thinking maybe. This guy's a heck of a player, and he is going to get a lot of money. And it's not going to be with the Rangers because the Rangers are really young and they got some. I mean, Matt would know. They got some pretty good players coming up. They're going to need some big contracts. So
yeah, and they also have Fox at Mika Zibanejad. Their extensions are going to start next year. So
yeah, they got to watch their money. All right, let's switch gears to another trade that really kind of came in under the wire here. From what I understand from Pierre LeBrun, it almost didn't happen. Victor, what do you think of the Max Domi to the Carolina Hurricanes? There's another Eastern Conference team that we were all sort of waiting to see what they would do because they're a really strong team as well. Didn't necessarily need to do a whole lot, but they made a kind of a last minute move here. They had Max Domi, Tyler Inamoto for Aiden Hreschuk, defenseman. Kind of one of those deals where nobody, I don't know, what do you think? Did nobody want Max Domi? Is that what happened here? And that's why Carolina swept in here? Or what was the story, do you think?
Okay, wait, I'm confused. I'm looking at this and it says the Panthers acquired Domi and Carolina gets Inamoto and Columbus gets Hreschuk. Am I reading that wrong? I'm on.
No, I think what happened was the Florida Panthers were the third team to allow for some salary cap retention, right? So Columbus retained salary in the deal, then Florida retained salary in the deal so that they could get Max Domi all the way down. Because if you noticed, Aaron Ekblad got hurt, right? And so he went on LTIR, which gave Florida a bunch of salary cap cushion to play around here. And so they used that cushion to help out Columbus make a deal with Carolina. I don't know what the sweetener is. It's going to Florida for this. But I think that's how it worked. Am I right? Everybody, is that how that went?
Yeah.
Okay. So it is Carolina that winds up with Max Domi.
It looks like they got someone named Igor Korshkov. So I guess that's the sweetener. I don't know that person, but
Florida Panthers acquire Igor Korshkov from Carolina, 2022 6th-round pick from Columbus, and retain 25% of Domi's contract. So he goes from 5 whatever down to, I don't know what that's going to be, like 1.9, something like that. So I don't know. What do you think? Did Carolina need Domi? Is this a kind of a flyer here? And not to pun on words, I guess, with Philadelphia, but like, did Carolina need this?
No, probably not. But, I mean, Carolina and Florida were two of the teams I think that didn't probably need to do much, but did it anyways because they wanted to push their chips in and be better. I mean, Domi has been someone who has some, offensive pop, but has kind of struggled to drive play. And if there's one thing Carolina can do pretty well, it's drive the play down into the other team's zone really well. And he adds a little bit of grit and, offensive ability there. And so I think paired with some of the other options that they have there, I think he could be okay. I think it's interesting. Basically it was kind of I think Columbus was happy to be out from under the contract. He only has one more season after this, so it's not the end of the world, but it does seem like Columbus was pretty happy about that. And I guess, Carolina has shown to be able to rehabilitate, certain players like D'Angelo, and they have such a strong, basically entire forward core that I think that they have some options there that they can pair him with. And he's the kind of player that, in a gritty playoff series might be able to add some elements that maybe they don't have in some of their more finesse players. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's not what I would have expected, but it's Carolina's such a good team. They're going to be good either way with or without Dylan.
Blaine, you know the best version of Max Domi. So what is Carolina getting? Are they possibly getting a guy who could explode offensively? Like, he's, in theory, on paper, when he's playing his best hockey, he's a perfect playoff pickup, right? But are they going to get that? You might know better than us, some of us that don't cover Columbus too extensively. What's Max Domi going to offer them?
Well, he's had some injury problems, so he's been slow to get off the mark. And since he's come back to play, I believe it's been the last 30 some odd games, he's been back on that pace that he had in Montreal during his career season. It could be because it's a contract year. So going to Carolina to play some playoff games and prove his worth is likely going to bring out the best in him. But at the same time, his last name is Domi, so you got to watch out for that temper. He hits the playoffs, he might pull a Kadri or something and just do something dumb. But I expect that he's going to really provide Carolina quality on a third line.
Yeah, if they can get the most out of Max Domi, then they're in good shape. I'm going to kind of go all over the board here. This one isn't actually a trade, but I wonder if it will turn into a trade. And I don't know who wants to take this one. Maybe Brooke, let's start with you. Jake DeBrusk signs a 2-year contract extension in Boston. Do you have an immediate reaction to this? Like, here's a player that we all thought was going to be moved, maybe not at the deadline, but probably in the summer, and probably still will be, because the reports are that he has not rescinded his trade request. He still wants out of Boston, but he signs a 2-year deal at $4 million a pop, just, I think, so that the Boston Bruins will have an easier time trading him to a team that knows what his kind of his future is going to be. Do you have an immediate reaction on that one?
I was pretty shocked with that one. At first, I thought maybe it would be a sign-in trade because it looked like that might have been kind of what the deal was. And I think there's a market for him for sure. He's a young player that can provide a lot of depth. But yeah, I am kind of shocked that he kind of stayed through that. But this season will be very, very telling. I think maybe he'll get more this offseason. But I actually am laughing about the fact that he requested a trade and then they just re-signed him and he's still here. And so we'll see.
Well, at first I wasn't sure if the signing was a sign that maybe the two sides had talked and sort of figured it out, because DeBrusk was playing okay. His last few games, he's not been so great. But at one point, I think he had like 9 points in 5 games or something. So he was really on fire. Steven, what'd you think? When you saw the signing, were you like, oh man, he's going to get traded today? Or were you thinking, nah, this is just for a little bit down the road, future planning. We'll see what teams are interested in doing.
Yeah, I probably lean towards thinking it meant that there was a trade coming and that they were just trying to maybe get a little more out of it with his salary cap future sort of leveled off and known, because that's always a question mark for GMs when you trade for somebody who you have to give a new contract to, even if they are an RFA. But I'm not really shocked that they didn't pull the trigger on it, because they are still a competitive team. And we saw a couple teams like Arizona take a step back and not trade a player that they have under term, because why rush it? I do think this is completely off the board and not based on any actual inside info, but both Vladimir Tarasenko and Jake DeBrusk have asked for a trade, and I really could see those two teams being partners on those deals. The Bruins would have to do some, work to get the salary cap free, but I think DeBrusk is exactly the kind of player the Blues would love to have, that fits really their mindset and is about the age of their young core. And I would just kind of watch for those two in the offseason to be a potential match.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him, because I just don't have a clue where he sits exactly with Boston. And I wonder if they play well and win, if he'll change his mind, right? Like, if they say winning changes everything, right? Like, so if Boston plays well, who really knows what's going to happen here?
Yeah, and he has the history there too, so it would make sense for him to, stick around.
All right, I'm going to focus on my team for a couple seconds here. The Edmonton Oilers added Brett Kulak and Derek Brassard. And Blaine, I'll get you to help me out a little bit on this one, because you know Brett Kulak better than probably anybody on this panel. We needed a left shot defenseman, depth defenseman. That was kind of our priority. We had no money at all. Ken Holland spent all of $612,000 today in his cap. His big move was adding Evander Kane. Even that wasn't terribly expensive. What are the Oilers getting in Brett Kulak?
You're getting an ideal third pairing defenseman who can really skate and move the puck. So he fits exactly what Edmonton wants to do. And if there's any injuries, he's very capable of stepping up and playing bigger minutes. He did it with the Canadiens. He played on a top pairing with Jeff Petrie during the last couple of seasons, and they were one of the best possession number pairings in the NHL that year. So he's a very capable defenseman. He can put up some points, but more importantly, he's able to clear his zone and get the puck up ice quickly, which in Edmonton means more McDavid speed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be huge. And I think they needed somebody reliable because they didn't make any changes to their goaltending. So if you can keep the puck out of your zone as much as possible, not that Kahkonen has been terrible, but he's been hit or miss, right? So you never really know. And then they added Derek Brassard. He's played for 10 different NHL teams. I don't know how many people on this panel had Derek Brassard on their team at one point. He's been traveled very much so. He's a $412,000 player for the Oilers right now because the Flyers retained his salary too. So I like that pickup. It's a good depth add. I don't know that it's going to be a huge difference maker, but he can pop in the offense when he's doing okay. He's a good face-off guy. He can kill penalties. He adds veteran leadership. I think he's played like 117 playoff games or something. So should be a decent, wasn't a busy day for the Oilers, but it certainly was something. Let's talk about one of the biggest trades that happened over the entire deadline. Victor, I'll start with you. Claude Giroux goes to the Florida Panthers. We kind of caught wind that maybe Colorado was in this, maybe St. Louis was in this, but there's mixed reports here. Some people are saying that it was only ever the Florida Panthers and that the Flyers never actually talked to anybody else. And then we heard that some reports that Boston made a good offer, St. Louis Colorado made a good offer. In fact, some reporting that they were making better offers, but it was the Florida Panthers he wanted to go to. So that's where he goes. What's your thought on Giroux going to Florida?
I thought that was interesting too. Joe Sakic said that they were into him, but Giroux wanted to go to Florida. So that was basically what happened. I think it's kind of interesting on Giroux's part. I mean, that it's so stacked. Florida's path to the Cup is going to be a little bit more challenging, I think, than Colorado's. And I think, they're both obviously really good teams. So he was picking from two good options, but it just seems like the West is a little bit more open. And I think that's a curious choice on his part. I'm not going to Colorado, but yeah, he's going into a super deep forward core. And I think it's going to be interesting to see him not be the man, right? Because he's been the man in Philadelphia for so long, and now he's just going to be a part of a really good team, and no one's going to be looking at him to, drag the offense, and that might be really, really good for him, or he might not do well in that role because it's a little bit foreign to him. So it'd also be good though that they have such good play driving centers because he's, I think, been a lot better on the wing in the last couple of years, and his days at center, I think, are his better days at center, I think.
We might have lost Victor for a second there. So I'm going to jump over to Mariah while we're waiting. Oh, sorry. We're losing you. We're cutting in and out here. Mayday. But we'll come back to you in a second here. Mariah, what's your thought? I know Giroux was one of the biggest names on the trade bait board. Good trade for Florida. Do you think the Flyers did the right thing by moving him to a place that he wanted to go? Not that they had a whole ton of choice, but they did right by the guy. Nice ceremony on the way out. 1,000 games in Philadelphia. What did you make of the trade?
I think it's good. I was going to make a lighthearted joke and say he wanted to go to the beach. That's why he wanted to go to Florida instead of Colorado. But
there's other reasons to go to Colorado, though.
That's I think it's good. I'm partial to Florida because they have Brunette as a coach, and I really am a fan of him and what he's done with that team so far after everything that's gone on there. I think it's good. Like you said, it's kind of stacked a little bit. Might have been an easier path in Colorado, but I don't know. I knew he was gonna move. It was just where, and Philadelphia did the right thing. I think he deserves a chance to go somewhere that is probably ahead of Philadelphia. So I think it's good.
Yeah, it's hard not to cheer for a guy like that. Victor, did you have one final thing when we lost you there? Would you have a last minute thing you wanted to add there that we got cut off on?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just saying that it'll be interesting to see how he handles not being the man in Florida, just being part of the team. I'm not sure if that came through before, but he's always been the man in Philadelphia. So it'll be interesting to see if he adapts to that or whether he struggles a little bit with that role. It isn't always so easy for star players like him.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see if he takes more of the Joe Thornton approach or he takes some more of the young guy star approach like the Huberdeau or whatever, right? Should be fun to watch that. Steven and Matthew, I'm going to come to you guys for this next one. Mark Giordano goes from the Seattle Kraken to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Steven, I'll start with you. There was some talk, maybe Calgary would be in this, but the wrinkle in the CBA suggested that once you've moved a player within that thing, I think it's the same calendar, you can't reacquire the player and get any salary cap assistance for that or bring a third team in to help you. So that ruled Calgary out right away. They couldn't do anything. They weren't going to take Giordano back at his full salary. So Seattle moves him to Toronto. What do you think of the trade?
I think it's a great addition for Toronto and a pretty good move for Seattle. I think I'm a little surprised that Giordano wasn't a hotter ticket item at the deadline because of all of his experience. And, he's still a really good defender metrically, maybe not quite as good offensively as he used to be, but some of that could be being in Seattle too. But I think he slots in perfectly for what the Maple Leafs need. They need some veteran leadership on the back end. He can go reunite with Brody up there and, help assist while Muzzin's recovering from his medical issues. And for the Kraken, they didn't get a first round pick, but they now have just an absurd amount of picks in the coming years. They have 12 picks next year, 6 in the first 3 rounds, 13 picks the year after that. 6 of those are in the first 3 rounds, and then already 9 picks in 2024. So not building like the Golden Knights did where they're a success right away, but certainly doing a pretty good job of going the more traditional expansion team route and building for the future.
Yeah, I guess the only counter argument to having that many picks is if the expansion draft is any indication, they might not be the best team to have that many picks. But yeah, hopefully they do a better job than they did with their expansion selections because they moved a whole bunch of those guys that they picked up. Matthew, I have a question for you. It's a little off topic, but it's also about the Giordano trade. So there's a theory going around that Kyle Dubas specifically showed public interest in players like Ben Sherratt and Josh Manson and all that stuff to get teams to go, oh my God, Toronto wants to be in on this. We better get in on this, and then make those trades so that Dubas could then go get Giordano for like half the price and a drop discount because he was the one guy left and all the big guys looking for defensemen already got their guy. Do you believe that at all? Do you think any of that is true, or is this just Giordano was always on Toronto's radar?
I don't believe that. I think Giordano was always on the radar. Toronto guy. He wanted to go there. It seemed like that was the only place he would go and waive his no trade, at least from what I've heard from Maple Leafs Lounge, that guys over there. So it's like, I think Giordano was always going to be someone that they were going to get. It just depended on what the cost was going to be. Dubas managed to not trade a first round pick in that deal, which everyone was thinking that that's what Toronto's going to do. And they gave up a couple other, second round picks, right? So it's still kind of a premium. I wouldn't give up second rounders, but they didn't give up a first round pick for the first time in a long time, which is something that they, like the Canucks, they have to keep their first round pick. They can't be trading them away, and they have to build up their prospect pool. So, I mean, it was a good trade, I think, all around, but I don't believe that thing. I mean, I don't think, but I mean, you don't know what's going on in the background, right?
Some people think Dubas is a silent genius, right? I love how Blaine's just like, no. What's your take on that one? Is that just a bunch of baloney?
That's utter horse cocky. The man he's a smart GM, but come on, that's like Leafs Twitter saying, he's playing
Maple Leaf fanboys talking about
he's playing 4D chess and everyone else is playing checkers kind of crap. If Giordano was the guy they were going after, Giordano wanted to go to Toronto. Yeah. They made it happen. He didn't give up a first, so good for him. But I'm going to be honest, Toronto did not do anywhere near enough to even, in my eyes, win a first round.
Well, if they don't win a first round, what happens? That's the real question.
Laugh my head off.
Well, I know you will, but I wonder what happens with what happens to Sheldon Keefe? What happens to Kyle Dubas? Do they survive this? I
don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see. But yeah, Dubas is getting a lot of props for the way he didn't trade at first, but I'm not sure I believe that whole theory. I think that's just a fun narrative play. I just wanted to get everybody's reaction on that one. That was pretty good. All right, Matthew, I'm coming back to you. Hampus Lindholm to the Boston Bruins. Not surprised that he goes to the Boston Bruins. I am a little surprised with the extension, though. What did you make of the trade and then immediately signing him to an 8-year deal?
Well, I get the trade. I mean, at first, you get a guy and he's going to help your defense. He's a Boston Bruins type defenseman. I mean, he fits in that system. In Anaheim, it was clear that once they were going out of the playoffs and they weren't going to make it, he was going to be out. And but the extension was what surprised me. And this is something that, like, an 8-year deal, he is. At the end of his eight years, he's going to be pretty old. And,
36 or something, right?
36. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like you're signing him when he's like 23 or anything like that. You're signing him when he's 27. And it's a bit, I don't know. I hate 8-year deals in general. I don't like these long, crazy deals that put these guys into their 35, 36 year. I'm of the belief, I like the 4-year. 4-year deals I like. I mean, they're not overly long and they're not really short. So you get a nice sweet spot, but it doesn't seem like a lot of GMs do those deals anymore. So it's like, it's always either you're going for a bridge deal 2 years or you're going for the craziness of the 8.
Well, Anaheim offered him 5. And
that's a good one.
But I don't know what that would have cost. Would have had to been at least 5 times 8, 5 times 8.5. Do you think, if that's what it would have been to get that done? And he didn't want 5, he wanted 8. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, it was quite the trade. I mean, Boston needed something, right? Everybody else was adding defensemen, and Boston absolutely was the one team that needed to get one. All right. I don't know if I've missed any, but let's do this. Let's go around. And I told you guys I was going to do this first, and I totally lied because we're doing it last. But let's talk the best and worst. I'm going to let you each have one. So, I mean, you can each take a best and each take a worst. Matt, I'll start with you. If we missed any of the trades that we think are kind of a big one, this is probably your opportunity to talk about those trades. I have a feeling I know Blaine's going to add one in here. But Matt, Grazel, I'll start with you. What's the best trade that you think you could take away from the deadline, and what do you think was the worst trade? And take maybe 10, 15 seconds for each one if you can.
Okay. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking that the best trade, I like the Panthers getting Claude Giroux. I think that's going to be a good trade for them. As mentioned earlier, the only reason why it wouldn't work out is if he has trouble adjusting to that role where he doesn't have to be the guy. But when you're playing with a Hart Trophy candidate in Huberdeau, and they have a really deep team. So, yeah, I think that was a good trade for them. It should help them in a tough Eastern Conference.
And the worst one, what do you think was the worst trade of the weekend?
If
you don't have one, that's cool. You can go with one.
Yeah. I don't really have one off the top of my head.
I'm actually surprised that there weren't like a bunch of really bad ones. Typically, there's a ton of bad ones, right? But there's not that many to take away this time. I got one in my head, but it was even like that one wasn't like, oh my God, that's so bad. Usually there's a bunch of crappy ones. Brooke, what about you? Do you have a best and a worst, or just one or the other?
You know what? I'll just go with, I guess, hometown here. I'll say Fleury's deal was the best because it was actually very fair, I think, for both sides. I think both sides got what they needed out of it. And like I said, I'm happy for Fleury that he gets to go to a good team. And I'm kind of with you guys too about there's not really one that sticks out to me of like really bad trades, which I guess is a good thing. But this trade deadline in general was kind of meh. There wasn't a whole lot going on, more than usual. But yeah, I'll say, most of them I think were good actually, but I'll say Fleury for hometown reference.
Yeah, I think they're actually by number, there were more trades than last year, but I think it was spread out so evenly. And then there was so much happening this past week. There was like one or two every hour on today. So it kind of felt like it was spread out really good. Steven, do you have a best and a worst or both?
Yeah, sure. I think best trade, not quite on deadline day, but the Brandon Hagel trade, I think for both teams really makes a lot of sense. I think he's a perfect addition and very cost controlled for the Lightning, who can definitely afford to give up first round picks right now. But I think the Blackhawks to get 2 first round picks for, a middle 6 guy is pretty great work as well. And I'll stay close to home for the worst trade. I don't think it's really the worst trade necessarily, but I don't think the Blues trade for Nick Leddy makes a lot of sense. We didn't really talk about it here today, but I just don't think he moves the needle much for the Blues, and they give up some pretty decent assets to get him. I think one of the factors there is that they get Oscar Sundqvist's salary off the books for next year as well. So they're probably looking at that as more of a plus than a loss, but not one that I think really keeps them competitive with the teams in the division that have made a lot of moves.
That makes sense. Before I move to Mariah to get yours, I want to ask Brooke, because it was brought up, Brandon Hagel. Are you as happy for him as you are for Fleury to move on, or were you like, what the hell is Chicago doing?
Yeah, I am actually, because I loved Brandon Hagel, to be honest. I think most people do. I loved how he played and stuff, but if you can get 2 first-rounders for someone like him, you just can't say no to that. And I'd say that about any player. You get 2 first-round picks for any player, you take it. So I'm happy for him too. He gets another chance at a cup, and the Blackhawks get some assets, which they need for a rebuild.
Yeah. No, that's the thing. There was a mixed reaction. Some people hated the trade, including some of the people on the team. And then other people just were like you, it's 2 first-round picks, and there's no guarantee he's going to be a good player, we think. And he's got a team-friendly deal. But man, 2 first-round picks is exactly what Chicago needs. And he's more valuable to another team than he is to Chicago right now, just based on their timeline and the way things are going. Mariah, what about you? Do you have a best and a worst, or both?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, Brooke, I think you called that trade too last week. Not necessarily the trade itself, but you called that player.
Yeah, I did. I'm glad that had worked out.
And obviously for best, I'm going with Fleury, because I'm hopeful that we'll go all the way with him and he can win a cup and we can have some fun here in Minnesota. As far as worst, it's not necessarily the trade itself. It was the one we just talked about with Lindholm, the 8-year deal. I hate those, and I just think, especially at his age, it's like, why are you doing this? And yeah, that would be mine.
It'll be interesting to see how quickly that deal goes sour, if it goes sour, right? Like it might not be one of those deals that goes sour in like 5-6 years. They could go sour in like year 2, year 3. So that'll be really interesting. Blaine, do you have a best and a worst?
Yeah, the worst, I'm going to have to go with Ottawa picking up Travis Hamonic. I mean, it works out amazing for Vancouver, but why did Dorian decide to do this? I don't know.
I was hoping that would make it all the way to me.
I was hoping it to me.
Oh my gosh.
But my God, like, did they have blackmail stuff on him? I have no idea. It was pretty bad. But for the best, I think, overall, the biggest impact is probably going to be the Sherratt deal to Florida, because bringing Sherratt in is going to open up a ton of ice time for Ekblad and Weegar. Sherratt's going to take those heavier minutes, and that'll allow Ekblad to focus on the offensive side, Weegar as well, and it really solidifies that top 4. So it makes Florida a bigger danger in the playoffs.
Yeah, the way that Ekblad's thing is the timing. You never want to see anybody get hurt, but I mean, you couldn't have had a better time to have Sherratt come in too, right? As long as Ekblad comes back somewhere in that first round, then you're absolutely right. That's going to make a huge difference. Victor, what about you? Do you have a best and a worst?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to piggyback on what Blaine said, because I actually think that the Sherratt trade was the worst one, frankly. I don't think Ben Sherratt is very good. He bleeds scoring chances. Yes, he's a physical defenseman, and yes, that is something you arguably need in the playoffs, and he will provide that. But I understand why they did it. They did it because of what happened to Ekblad, and I felt like they needed to, and so I totally understand that. But I'm not sure that he fits into their style. And I'm not sure that I am sure that I feel like they paid too much for him with the picks and Schmidt is not an elite prospect or anything, but he's something. So that was going to be my worst. It does work out well for Montreal, so there's that. But I think for my best, maybe a little bit under the radar, but I think Arturi Lehkonen going to Colorado, he's just such a solid 2-way player, and he is going to just add tremendous depth to an already deep forward core in Colorado. So I think he's one of those guys that maybe he's not as exciting or sexy of a name, but I think he helps that team more than just about any other deal, except for maybe the top end guys we talked about. So I really like that Lehkonen deal.
Yeah, he was considered one of the guys that I know Frank Zaravelli had him on. Everybody was calling, it's like the Barclay Goodrow or the Blake Coleman of the previous years, right? Like he's that depth guy that might not give you a bunch of offense, but he does everything else that you could possibly ever want. And the coaches just absolutely love him. So yeah, he's going to be a big addition for Colorado for sure. They added a lot of like really decent depth in the middle. Like they rounded out their roster pretty solidly. Matthew, you got a best and a worst?
Everyone's just taking all mine, so I'll just.
That's what you get for going last.
I like the Lehkonen deal. That was the one I was going to go for, but I'll go with a different one. I think Tyler Motte going to the Rangers was a really great deal for the Rangers. Like I said, I loved him in Vancouver, and he just does it. He does everything. He's probably one of the best penalty killers in the NHL. He's got speed. He can play that. He can score goals. Not a lot of them, but he played really well in the playoffs in the past in the bubble for the Canucks. So I really love the guy. His personality, his locker room presence will really help them as well. He's just going to add a lot to that team for the playoffs. And I'm hoping that he just comes back to Vancouver in the off season and that he can just play for the Rangers for a bit. But yeah, that's my best. And my worst was, there's not a lot of really bad ones, but my worst was going to be the Hamonic one because I didn't understand it from an Ottawa perspective. I mean, I'm glad the Canucks got his salary off the books, but for a team that's rebuilding, it makes really no sense to trade for a guy who has term. And they're saying that they're hoping he can play well with Jake Sanderson when he comes up. And he'd be a good partner for him. But I don't know if that's really a reason to get him at this point. But yeah, that would be mine.
Yeah, that was my worst one. And to be totally honest with you, when I heard the trade the first time, I thought that Vancouver was throwing in the third to make the deal. But it wasn't. It was Ottawa paying a third to get $3 million in Travis Hamonic. I'm like, what? That was shocked by that one. That one just floored me with that one. My best. What's that?
Blackmail.
Yeah, maybe. I'm going to go with a little different one for my best, and I could be way wrong here, but I'm kind of curious. I think Vladislav Nemesnikov going to Dallas is going to be an interesting one because I think the Stars are a team that's right on the bubble. If they get in, they're going to need a little boost here headed towards the playoff. They're going to need to win a handful of games. And man, can he get hot? If he gets hot, he's a pretty good offensive player. And they only gave up a 4th round pick in 2024 to get him from Detroit. So that could wind up being a real winner. It's not one of those really fancy marquee big name trades or anything like that, but I have a feeling that maybe it could have flown under the radar a little bit. And Dallas didn't do much else because they were right in the middle, right? So we'll see if it makes a difference for them or not. But I could say that, and then in 3 days they could be out of the playoff mix. But we never really know. Anybody else want to take a final swing at something we did not cover? Were there any topics that we just completely missed and I brain farted on? Everybody's looking up.
No.
Well, that's good then. We did a decent job of covering most of it. I appreciate it, you guys. Thanks for coming back on. Matt, Brooke, Steven, Mariah, Blaine, Matthew, Victor, and myself, Jim. We appreciate everybody joining us and watching this. Hit a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Check out the morningskate.io newsletter for the Hockey Raiders. Go to thehockeyraiders.com. All these guys are doing fantastic work. So check out all their stuff on the Hockey Raiders. I'm sure they're going to have some stuff talking about the trade deadline and everything that follows and their teams either leading up to the playoffs or we're going to be doing for the off season. But for Jim Parsons and the Hockey Raiders, this has been the post trade deadline 2022 show. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you next year for the same thing.